I remember the exact moment I fell in love with the history of Mississauga. I was in elementary school, and my older sister Carolyn was doing a research project on local history, and in particular what we can learn about a place from how we honor our dead. So she took me on a walk through the cemetery in our neighborhood, Spring Creek, which just happened to be one of the oldest cemeteries in the region. As she walked me around the older headstones, most located just inside the stone gates on Clarkson Road, she pointed out what the different symbols meant. There was the fickle finger of fate, the weeping willow, obelisks to indicate well-to-do families, and at the highest point of the cemetery, a stone angel. Now, back in the day, stone angels were reserved for the founders of a community, and indeed the stone angel in Spring Creek Cemetery stands guard over the final resting spot of Warren Clarkson, for whom Clarkson is named. Stories carved in stone. I've been seeking out people's stories ever since. Welcome to We Built This City, Episode 9, Leaving Our Mark. For a generation of home cooks and gardeners, whenever they get into a jam, they knew they could count on Mrs. A. Pioneering broadcaster Kate Aiken was a lifestyle influencer long before the selfie stick. Kate was the fifth of 7 children in a family that owned a general store. From an early age, she displayed a knack for entrepreneurship and cooking. At the age of 12, she sold cosmetics door to door on her bicycle, and by 14, she was already a supply teacher. After several years of teaching and helping her mother run the family store, Kate married Henry Aiken in 1914. They bought a poultry farm, which she ran successfully along with a canning business. And that's when Canada's media industry came calling. Editors of women's pages in daily newspapers and on the radio were always on the lookout for women who could speak to women, and they found it in Aiken, who they described as a practical farm businesswoman. It took her all the way to the Canadian National Exhibition, the CNE, where she presented Country Kitchen, a series of popular talks on canning and preserving. Aiken's broadcasting career began almost serendipitously. In 1934, she was offered a radio show as an emergency replacement for an injured broadcaster. However, her natural talent and engaging personality quickly made her a hit. By the 1940s, she was one of CFRB's top personalities, a role she held for 23 years. Her show was syndicated to other stations and eventually picked up by CBC in 1948. Where she appeared for 9 years on The Good Neighbor Show. Mrs. A had gone national. Aiken's radio programs focused on homemaking subjects such as cooking and etiquette, but she was also known for her documentary journalism. For instance, she interviewed world leaders like Eleanor Roosevelt and Benito Mussolini. Her shows were immensely popular, with an estimated 3 million listeners, and she employed 21 secretaries to answer all her fan letters, about 260,000 annually, all done from Sunnybank Acres, her 10-acre property on Mississauga Road, just north of Burnhamthorpe. She offered home cooks hearty recipes that were easy to prepare and cost-effective, home economics at its best, and her butter tart recipe was sublime. Mrs. A was also a trendsetter, starting a spa business on her property long before self-care became big business. Her cooking classes at the CNE drew thousands of attendees, both men and women, eager to learn from her. She was the CNE's women's director from 1938 to 1952, and later women's editor of the Montreal Standard. She published numerous recipes and cookbooks, which became staples in Canadian kitchens, including my mom's. Her ability to relate to women, whether on the farm, in the suburbs, or downtown, made her advice invaluable. She understood their challenges and provided practical solutions to make their lives easier. During World War II, Kate stepped up, serving as supervisor of conservation for the Consumers Branch, Wartime Prices and Trade Board, helping to alleviate food shortages in the UK. She was a panelist on shows like Fighting Words and even conducted interviews profiling Hungarian refugees in 1956. As television emerged in the early 1950s, Aiken transitioned seamlessly to the new medium. She appeared on talk shows and continued to share her knowledge and expertise with a wide audience. Her popularity and credibility made her a trusted figure in Canadian households. Aiken retired from broadcasting in 1957, but her work didn't stop there. She remained active, working for the United Nations Association in Canada, volunteering at the South Peel Hospital, now the Mississauga Hospital, and serving on the CBC's board of directors. She also wrote columns for the Globe and Mail and continued to publish cookbooks. Kate Aiken's Canadian cookbook was so popular that it was reissued in 2004, a testament to Aiken's universal and eternal appeal. Aiken passed away in 1971 at the age of 81, but her legacy lives on. Mrs. A paved the way for women in media and helped shape Canadian culinary tastes and practices. Chef's kiss, Mrs. A. Chef's kiss. If Kate Aiken celebrated the flavors of Canada, George Hunter had an eye for showing us the country. One of Canada's most prolific documentary photographers, Hunter's 7-decade career gave us some of Canada's most iconic industrial and natural landscapes, celebrating his love of country through his camera lens. Hunter was born in 1921 in Regina, Saskatchewan, and got his start in newspapers, covering the home front during World War II. He worked as a stills photographer for the National Film Board, which allowed him to travel the country. However, Hunter wasn't content to just shoot from the ground. He sought to elevate Canadians' understanding of our familiar landscapes by granting us a different perspective. A licensed pilot, Hunter pioneered the use of aerial photography. He captured breathtaking views of Canada's north, the prairies, and our coastal regions. His Mississauga studio was like walking through a contemporary history of Canada. There are his shots from the 1940s of Inuit in Canada, photos of miners with their challenging stares, and the work-worn hands of fishers hauling in their commercial nets. He was on site days before Nova Scotia's Rattray mine exploded, and somewhere over Edmonton, he almost fell out of a plane. An adventurer always ready for his close-up. And it wasn't just Canada that caught Hunter's eye. He visited over 135 countries and managed to talk his way onto the last plane out of Afghanistan as the country sat on the brink of the Soviet invasion. In the mid-1950s, his groundbreaking work was featured in Time magazine in a 12-page spread entitled The U.S. After Dark, which featured images of America's urban centers gleaming against a dark landscape. He was one of the first photographers to be inducted into the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts, and his images can be found in dozens of permanent collections at public galleries across Canada. More than 100 of his photographs are part of the Canadian Museum of Contemporary Photography. This vast collection is a testament to his ability to document the changing face of Canada through its people, its industries, and its natural landscapes. In 2017, the National Film Board of Canada and Firefly Books published George Hunter's Canada, Iconic Images from Canada's Most Prolific Photographer. It showcased a selection of Hunter's work, celebrating his contribution to Canadian photography and ensuring that his legacy continues to inspire future generations. And then there's Hunter's work with the Canadian Mint. If you are old enough to remember paying for things with real cash in the 70s and 80s, you once carried a George Hunter image in your wallet. 2 of his photographs grace the Canadian $5 and $10 bills. The $10 bill from the Scenes of Canada series of the 1970s and 80s featured an engraving of the Polymer Corporation plant in Sarnia, Ontario. The decision to use an industrial scene was unusual, as Canada typically highlighted its natural resources and landscapes on its currency. The Polymer Corporation had played a crucial role during World War II. After Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, Canada faced a significant challenge, securing a reliable supply of rubber for the Allied war effort. The creation of the Polymer Corporation was a bold and risky move authorized by Canada's Minister of Munitions and Supply, C.D. Howe. Hunter's photograph is more than just an industrial scene. It represents a pivotal moment in Canadian history. The intricate details of the plant provided an ideal subject for engraving, making it a challenging yet rewarding choice for the $10 bill. From the heartland to the coast, Hunter's $5 image features a salmon seiner at work, taken at Ripple Point on the Johnstone Strait off the coast of British Columbia. The BCP-45 had an all-Indigenous crew at the time, including Alan Ollie Chickite from the Wewake Nation. Hunter's photograph not only showcases the beauty of the Canadian landscape, but also highlights the traditional occupation of seine fishing. The BCP-45 has since become a symbol of the West Coast fishing industry and way of life, much like the world-famous schooner, the Blue Nose, on the East Coast. Hunter's image, immortalized on the $5 bill, ensures that this piece of Canadian heritage is preserved and celebrated. Hunter was a great believer in the power of image and was a founding member of the Canadian Heritage Photography Foundation. In 2001, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Association of Photographers and Illustrators. And in 2014, George Hunter was inducted into Mississauga's Legends Row. George Hunter preserved our images. Ruth Hussey preserved our land. Rattray Marsh is the last remaining wetland area on the western side of Lake Ontario, and its survival is a testament to the British-born veterinarian. It sits on a 94-acre stretch of land along Lake Ontario in Clarkson and includes a cobble beach, wetland, fields, and woodlands. It's October 1954. Hurricane Hazel has ravaged the shores of Ontario. Amidst all this chaos, Ruth Hussey, accompanied by her 3 young boys, has just arrived from England. Their journey to Clarkson was delayed due to the severe flooding on the Humber River. Her husband, Brian, had come ahead and found work with British American Oil, securing the family a house on Meadowwood Lane. Little did anyone know that Hussey's arrival would herald a different kind of whirlwind, one that would forever change the fate of Rattray Marsh. Hussey, a woman of small stature but immense conviction, was a master of many trades. She was a scout and cub leader, a gardener, a naturalist, a dog breeder, a church choir member, a hiker, a seniors fitness teacher, and even a veterinarian. By 1956, the Hussey family had grown, moving to a new house at 1629 Water's Edge Road, with Ruth's passions now including activities such as hockey, rowing, riding, and being a track mom. Their new home was near the Rattray estate, where Major James Rattray generously allowed neighborhood children to use its sandy beach, play hockey on a protected pond, fish in the marsh, and ride his horses and pony. When Major Rattray passed away in 1959, residents like the Husseys were concerned about the future of his 148-acre estate, which comprised forest, farmland, beach frontage, and marshlands. Strangely, despite his obvious love of the land and his willingness to share it with neighbors, Major Rattray's will did not explicitly bequeath the land to anyone or any entity. And this is where Hussey stepped up. It's the early 1960s, and Ruth has just read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which addressed the excessive use of pesticides and their environmental impact. For Ruth, the book was a call to arms. Alongside her husband Brian and other community members, Ruth advocated for the purchase of Major Rattray's property to turn it into a public park. However, their initial efforts were met with resistance, and the land was sold to developers in 1963. The developers' plans for luxury housing and a yacht basin faced fierce opposition from environmentalists, including the South Peel Naturalist Club. Over the next 16 years, conservationists and developers would battle over the fate of Rattray Marsh. Hussey was among the most ardent protector of the marsh. She and her husband Brian worked with others to try and raise enough money to purchase the entire property and save it from development. However, Toronto Township Council wasn't interested. In the mid-1960s, the council approved the first phase of development, and soon bulldozers could be heard near the marsh. Heartbroken, Ruth refused to give up. Then fate intervened. In January 1967, after reading an article in the Globe and Mail about land conservation, Ruth wrote an impassioned letter to the editor, detailing the many wonders of Rattray Marsh and why Clarkson residents deserved to have this unique watershed preserved and protected. Something about that letter caught the public's imagination, and support started pouring in, leading to the formation of the Rattray Marsh Preservation Committee, with Ruth as chair. And like so many local advocacy groups have done, the Preservation Committee knocked on doors and spoke with neighbors, collecting 2,000 signatures and countless letters in support of preservation, which they presented to Toronto Township Council, who promptly ignored them. The pull of increased tax revenue and population growth held a stronger appeal than protecting marshland for birds, frogs, and fox. However, the tide began to turn in 1974. First, Ruth received the Carl Nunn Media Conservation Award from the Federation of Ontario Naturalists, officially recognizing her commitment to the marsh and elevating her profile. Also that year, the city of Mississauga was created, electing a new council that included marsh advocates, including a councillor from Streetsville, Hazel McCallion. A deal was struck. The city would agree to preserve the marsh if Ruth and the Preservation Committee could raise enough money to match the city's contribution. No problem, said Ruth. And it wasn't. Rattray Marsh officially opened to the public the next year. For the final 10 years of her life, Hussey was able to enjoy the fruits of her labor, walking through the marshlands she fought so hard to save. Today, you can enjoy Rattray Marsh on its own or as part of the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail, which travels 325 kilometers between Trenton and Hamilton. Rattray Marsh is managed by Credit Valley Conservation and can be accessed via Jack Darling Park at Turtle Creek. It is the single busiest access point in Credit Valley Conservation's entire system, welcoming over 300,000 visitors each year. At the western edge of Rattray, near the entrance on Old Poplar Row in the neighborhood where Hussey lived, you'll find a large stone that simply says, Ruth Hussey. Because of her, Rattray Marsh is ours. Kate Aiken was Canada's tastemaker. George Hunter showed us new perspectives, and Ruth Hussey gave us land to call our own. Each, in their own way, have left their mark on Mississauga, and in doing so, helped to build this city.
It took a lot of people and stories to build Mississauga into what it is today, Canada's 6th largest city. Come visit us across our social platforms and on our website at visitmississauga.ca.
You've been listening to a Podstarter production.